Well, hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're making a wall mount clamp rack. Well, truth be told, I actually did an episode of this quite a few years ago, but it's kind of gotten buried over the years, and I thought it was a good one to revisit. A, because I thought it would be useful to you guys, and B, because I have some new clamps that I need a rack for. So if I have that need, some of you out there may have the need. So let's head over to the bench and see what I have in mind for today. Well, the clamps that I have acquired are these Bessie unit clamps. I have 4 12-inch and 4 24-inch, and I want them to be hanging on the wall for easy access. So I need to make a rack for them. And what I'm going to do first is I need to know how big of a rack I want. I don't want these both on the same rack, although you could do that if your wall space is limited. I want the 12-inch on one rack and the 24-inch on another rack. That way, if I need a 24-inch clamp, I don't have to pull all my 12 inches out of there. So the first thing I need to know is how deep the clamp rack needs to be, and for that I've just stacked all of these clamps on top of each other, and we'll just take a measurement from the edge of the bench to probably about an inch past the top of our clamps, and we end up with about 5.5 inches there, but I'm actually going to add about 1.5 inches, so we're going to call this 7-inch. This is what I need for the depth of my clamp rack. So what I have is I have 4 pieces of 1/2 inch thick ply. It's just construction grade, it's nothing special, and I have actually cut them to be 7.5 by 7.5. So I added just a little bit more than what I initially intended. So the first thing I want to do is we need to make a lip on the front end of each of our boards that will keep our clamps from falling out. Say if you should hook one as you're pulling on another clamp, that little lip will go a long way to keeping your clamps in place. So in the top corner of each of our pieces of ply, I'm going to line up my circle template here, and I want to place a circle 1 1/4 inches in diameter. And we will do this for each one of our pieces of ply. We can now take a measurement down from the top of our board here, and we will take it down half the dimension of our circle. So 5/8 down from the top, right there, and we will draw a straight line across our board. And that will represent our lip. This will be our little kind of hook lip at the end to keep it so that our clamps don't fall off. And the last thing that we want to do here, as far as layout goes anyway, is I'm going to take my combination square, we'll place it on the bottom, we'll line it up with the edge of our 1.25 inch diameter circle, and we will draw a line joining it down to our bottom surface here. And there you go. That is the layout for the sidewalls that will hold our clamps. So do this layout on all 4 of your pieces, and then we're going to head over to the scroll saw. Well, now over here at the scroll saw, we are going to cut these out. Now, if you don't have a scroll saw, it doesn't mean you can't make one of these. This here, this whole layout is simple enough that you have many options here as to what you can do. You can use a bandsaw to cut this out. You can cut it out by hand with a fret saw. You can even use, if you wish, a jigsaw. It's just a clamp rack, so any method of like that would do you just fine. But for me, I like the scroll saw. I have one, I'm good at it, that's what I choose. So let's get all 4 of these cut out. All right, guys, I'm going to stop it right there because I can feel this blade is wandering all over the place. I have said it 1,000,001 times on this show. Blades are consumables. So if the blade is giving you a hard time or it's not cutting quite right because it's dull or it's been bent or what have you, get rid of it. Fold it in half, throw it in a jar to get rid of later. But don't be afraid to use up blades. It's what they're for. So we'll just place a new blade in here. And we can carry on with our cut. And with those 4 cut, we now need to take another couple measurements. The way that these clamps are going to hang is they will rest right like that, right on top of this top lip, and our bar will go in between. So I've taken a measurement of the bar and added just a little bit for wiggle room, and the measurement I get is 13/16 of an inch. So we now need to figure out what we want for a backer board. So what I've done is I've measured from this top surface here down to the bottom of our board, and I measure at 6 7/8. So I've cut 2 pieces of 1/2 inch plywood that are 5 inches wide and 6 7/8 long. And now we need to do just a little bit of layout on these 2 pieces. Well, the very first thing we want to do is draw ourselves a center line at 2.5 inches in from the edge of the board. And now measuring out from the center of that board, we need to place marks at 13/32 out from each side of our center line. And before we draw those lines out, we'll just check and verify that that does give us a 13/16 wide space there, and it does. So we can draw those lines, and that will represent the edges of our dados that we need to cut in this board in order to house our upright pieces that we already cut. So I've measured the thickness of our plywood, and it's actually 15/32 wide. So we will place another mark now, 15/32 over from the edge of each one of these outside lines. And those lines are going to represent the outer edge of our dados that will house our uprights. We now need to place some mounting holes. I prefer to place 4 holes and put a screw in each one of these corners with at least one of the sides catching a stud in the wall. So for that, I'm going to come in from each side 3/4 of an inch, and then I'm going to come down from the top 1 inch on each side, and those will be our mounting holes. And at that point on the board, I will drill and countersink for a number 8 screw. So get this layout done on your other piece, and we can get our holes drilled, and then we can head over to the table saw. Now I know that some of you do not have dado blades. So for that reason, I'm just going to use a regular blade at the table saw. It's a little extra work, but you can still get the results you want. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut our outside perimeter cuts. I'm making these dados 5/16 of an inch deep, so we can set our fence so that the blade will strike on the inside of that line for our dado to make the shoulder of our dado, and we can run a pass through. Because we made this out from the center line, it should be completely symmetrical. So we can then flip the piece 180 degrees and run it through again to get the outside edge of our second dado. We can then reset our fence so that it strikes to the inside of the line for the other edge of our dado, and then follow through with the exact same procedure, making one cut and then rotating it 180 degrees and making your second cut. And then all we need to do is reset our fence and make multiple passes till we get the inside of our dado hogged out. So with some careful measuring and some careful layout and setting up your tool properly, even without a dado blade, you can get perfectly sized dados for your project. So don't worry about not having a dado blade. You can still do the projects, you can still do the job. All right, so at this point now, now that I know that these dados fit in really well, I'm going to give all of our pieces a good sanding. Now with our uprights and our bases sanded, we can put our uprights aside, and I have added some lines here on the back of our bases. And what those lines refer to, they are in the center of our dados. And all we're going to do is on those lines, coming down at roughly about 1.25 inches, we are going to place a mark. And from the back of our piece, we will drill and countersink for a number 8 screw. This will help to strengthen our uprights and help them support the weight of our clamps. And with those holes drilled, we can now dry fit our piece together. We're going to align our top edge up here so that this surface here is flat right across. And once you're happy with the dry fit, what we're going to do is right through these holes in the back, we're going to drill a pilot hole into our uprights to be able to accept our number 8 screws. For me, I'm using number 8 by 1.5 inches. And now we can assemble this thing, and we'll just place a little bead of glue in here inside each of our dados. And then we can place our uprights back in, making sure that the top aligns. And then from the back of our piece, we can screw in our number 8 by 1.5 inches screws. And now all that's left to do is mount it. So I have the one mounted right here. You can see it with the clamps hanging down. And we'll just get this second one in place. And we'll be professional about this, guys. Get a level on it. Make sure that your clamps are hanging squarely, and then we can drive the rest of the screws home. And then all that's really left to do is hang your clamps. And there you have it. A shop-made clamp rack. Guys, this is an extremely simple project. It's a quick one. You can knock these off in a couple of hours. And if you are one of these guys that have your clamps just thrown into a drawer or a box, and you got to rifle through that box or that drawer to find the clamp that you need when you're working on a project, then this is the project for you. Because I'm telling you, until you get them up on the wall where they're easy access and just able to grab them, you really don't quite know the value of this simple plywood project. The other thing with this project is, as well, is that It protects your clamps. When you're throwing stuff in a drawer and that sort of thing, you have the potential, a very high level of potential to damage those clamps. With these Bessie unit clamps on both sides of the bar, they have that kind of serrated edge that the clamp grabs onto to give that firm, even pressure. So throwing them into a drawer like that, steel on steel, smacking those serrated edges around, honestly, you're just asking to damage your stuff. And this stuff is not cheap, so why would you not take care of it? Honestly, guys, try this for yourself. These are spectacular racks. I've used them for years. They've never let me down. They've never failed. And they've always kept my clamps exactly where I wanted them and exactly where I needed them. Guys, obviously this project is open to all kinds of modifications. The most common modification of this is changing the length or the depth of your uprights. That way you can accommodate more clamps. But keep in mind, that's extra weight. So if you're going to increase the length of them to hold those clamps, you may want to increase the vertical as well. That way you have a little more strength, a little more support, and it's not so hard on the plywood. If you don't have 1/2 inch plywood, guys, make it out of 3/4. If you don't have 3/4, you can make it out of scrap solid stock. It's whatever you like, but just be careful with putting the weight on solid stock. Make sure that your long grain is what is supporting the weight and not your short end grain, because it will just snap off. Guys, if you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. You click that bell and then you won't miss notifications of future episodes of the show. I know this was a simple one today, guys, but I also know that it's a useful one. I hope that some of you out there have enjoyed this. I hope that you're going to try this for yourself in your shop. And more importantly, I honestly hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another woodworking video.